Authorities loved this. Regulators apparently did not. Briefly, it seemed like TV for kids would be overhauled to prohibit this pipeline.
The Children's Television Act of 1990 attempted to stall some of this mindless consumerism, but the language of the legislation was decidedly vague. The FCC simply did not delineate the difference between shows that were meant solely to entertain children and those that were meant to provide specific educational tools.
Meaning, basically anything could be presented as indistinctly educational, leaving Nickelodeon a pretty long runway to start building out a wacky, crass slate of shows.
You Can't Do That on Television was a zeitgeisty Canadian sketch program featuring young actors. It was picked up by American
I seem to be putting shit down and don't know where they
and
are.
in that time, a record 9 seasons were churned out in the U.S. It was the most popular show on Nickelodeon.
As Vox put it, the show was beloved by American kids because it represented the anarchic spirit, the very one that would come to define the network.
You Can't Do That ended its run just as the 90s were kicking off. But the program had already set a desirable precedent of messy and unorthodox shows, a stark contrast to its dry educational counterparts. Children delighted in seeing actors their own age performing comedic sketches laden with physical gags and toilet humor.
Nick had struck gold. Sketch, an underutilized format for kids, served dual purposes for the network. For one, the silly, often slapstick nature drew in young viewers like Garfield to lasagna.
On a more disenchanting note, the constant shuffle of sketches made it nearly impossible for kids to process the meaning of what they were laughing at.
You Can't Do That was able to quite literally cut in and out of sensitive topics. Not only were the underlying themes of the sketches not explained, they often went completely above the heads of viewers.
Take one of the show's recurring skits, known as the Firing Squad. One of the child actors would have to outsmart a character named El Capitan, who was dressed like a South American military general. To do so, kids often tripped the actor, who would then be shot in their place.
To recap, an adult actor dressed in a culturally appropriated outfit would feign being executed by a child. And that was the punchline. Unacceptable on multiple levels.
Still, these cringe-worthy moments weren't judged on whether they were suitable jokes for kids. In fact, the abrasiveness of one You Can't Do That sketch inadvertently created one of Nickelodeon's most enduring legacies.
Slime.
If an actor on series muttered the hallowed words, I don't know, a slippery green liquid would dump on their heads, coating them in literal shame. To be slimed was to wear the dunce cap of television, and kids at home loved the physicality and surprise of seeing their peers playfully disgraced.
The green goo was so popular that for a time it was part of Nickelodeon's logo. But slime had a complicated backstory.
As the story goes, the first iteration of slime was born in the props department of You Can't Do That.
This wasn't just a humble mixture of water and green food dye. To achieve that thick, goopy texture, the first batch of slime allegedly contained various liquids, one being green latex paint.
The prop masters made it simply upon instructions, no questions asked. But when its purpose was revealed, they were alarmed. They didn't know the gallons of slime were going to be splashed down on the actors. According to Business Insider, there was concern that the mixture contained potentially harmful ingredients. So they were sent back to the drawing board, or the mixing buckets rather, to create a safer concoction.
First, they sampled green Jell-O mixed with flour. It was a decent but not ideal consistency. Then came cream of wheat dyed green and doctored with baby shampoo. The latter was critical. Without it, the cream of wheat allegedly hardened so quickly that it left the actor's hair full of stiff, crusty granules.
While the slime recipe had solidified, the very existence of this neon sludge created another, more lingering issue.
Imitatable behavior. What would it inspire kids to do at home?
It appeared slime each other, which was all well and good if the mixture was just tinted jello and hot cereal.
However, many parents were concerned when homemade recipes cropped up on the internet listing the cleaning agent borax as an ingredient. This was worrisome, granted it could be toxic if ingested or if it repeatedly touched the skin.
Nickelodeon obviously didn't sanction nor endorse these recipes, but the network wasn't about to downplay the popularity of slime. In fact, it set about monetizing on the goo's heyday.
Take one Nickelodeon branded product that debuted in 1992, Green Slime Shampoo. The commercials featured bubbly kids watching You Can't Do That on television, then using the shampoo to recreate their own sliming in the shower.
Keep in mind that the bottle was only 8 ounces, smaller than most lattes these days. By the most conservative sliming standards, each bottle would last a week at most, leading hopefully to repeat purchases.
The branded shampoo confirmed that the network hadn't divorced itself from the tactics of its 80s predecessors. Encouraging kids to slime at home was still a way to levy the purchasing power of young viewers, or rather, that of their parents.
As Nick's green shampoo became a stunning success, major brands like Suave later produced it, a stage had been set for the successor to slime, namely GAC.
Coming up, GAC's darker nickname is revealed, and Double Dare becomes all the rage.
We're focused on tools that work faster, safer, better. For job site leaders who do the same, because in this business, true leaders are more than built.
There are some things you'll never understand, like why did that person ghost me? When did manspreading become socially acceptable? And how come that dinosaur theme park keeps reopening, given its safety record? But some things you can understand, like your excluding friends. The more you improve your score, the more you could save on things like credit cards, car loans, mobile contracts, and more. It's dead easy to check and completely free. Download the Experian app and check your score today. These happy days, head to Barcelo.com and get up to 50% off, booking your stay in amazing hotels. Imagine relaxing as you feel the sea breeze, the sun on your skin, and your only concern being to choose between reading by the sea or by the pool. Leave your stress behind and enjoy moments that make you smile. Book now at Barcelo.com and experience the little pleasures that change everything.
Now, back to the story. In the
1990s, Nickelodeon introduced a variety of shoppable products to tie in with its popular slate of shows. Messy, sticky substances would be the network's hallmark.
And while the notorious green slime had certainly paved the way for a substance called GAC, kids and Nickelodeon hosts alike were stern. Don't call it slime. GAC was its own thing.
As Nick personality Mark Summers later explained, GAC was a more potent and sticky goop than slime. It made its debut in 1992 on Double Dare, a children's game show that Summers hosted.
On the heel of GAC's TV premiere, a commercialized version hit toy store shelves. And to ramp up interest, Nickelodeon featured commercials with happy kids stretching an array of neon-colored putty. To their delight, they could spread it, throw it, even make fart noises with it.
These young viewers, though, knew nothing of the etymology of GAC. It was only 2 decades later that Mark Summers would admit to Huffington Post that GAC wasn't just a cheeky moniker.
It was also the street name in Philadelphia for heroin. It had become a dark inside joke for the crew and slid quite slyly into the vernacular of the show.
GAC was everywhere on the sets of Double Dare. Summers explained that it was slightly easier to clean than its predecessor. He remembered, We didn't use the same green slime because if it sat out on the stage under the hot lights, an oatmeal-based slime would bake like a rock. And if you didn't get those off the set, you'd have chunks of like greenish plaster.
But while Double Dare didn't spend too much time hosing down its set, the show had plenty of other issues that needed wrangling. Like how to curb the subtle innuendo that crept into episodes. Its contestants were paired into duos, and naturally, these teams needed names. A former participant would recall how, as an 11-year-old, he was one half of the Bodacious Tatas.
Adult humor aside, the main attraction of the show was, of course, the physical challenges.
Some were obstacle courses, others involved more bizarre acts of sheer gross madness. One former Double Dare set designer told Vulture that to balance both and stay within production restraints was a very fine line. Exciting versus safe, gross versus unsanitary.
Double Dare was known for incorporating kiddie pools filled with whipped non-dairy topping and mounds of greasy popcorn. Keeping kids interested meant keeping Nick's shows messy, which was no small task.
Food was tricky, both in how to use it and how to dispose of it.
For one, anything edible is notoriously risky. Set designer Byron Taylor remembered the concerns about using food in challenges, saying, "You don't want a bunch of kids choking on Ritz crackers because you're doing that gag where you stuff your mouth with crackers and try to whistle."
Clearly, anything classified as imitatable behavior at home was to be broached with great care. Considering how quick kids were to dump bottles of slime shampoo on their heads, producers wanted to eschew any dangerous recreations at home that might lead to costly lawsuits.
The other problem, and one that was far more pervasive, was the sheer amount of edible products that Double Dare required. It wasn't just a bucket of chips here or some chocolate syrup there.
Early in the show's run, parents and critics alike called out its food waste, placing the production team in the hot seat. Set designer Byron Taylor recalled that from that point on, they had to stop using anything that was identifiable as real food, meaning no nourishing food.
But finding alternatives that worked under these guidelines was tedious, not to mention noxious. Sometimes they used junk foods like Jell-O and whipped toppings, but ordinary whipped cream would go flat, so production paid for a more expensive alternative called Baker's cream.
Baker's cream was purchased by the hundreds of gallons and whipped in 60-quart mixers. According to Taylor, it took an entire bucket from the mixer to make one scoop of ice cream on the Sunday slide, one of the show's obstacle courses. He admitted it was a tremendous cost and a tremendous investment in time whipping that material up.
But however wasteful, whipped topping was at least inoffensive. The show later devolved into using expired government surplus baked beans.
Nearly 25 Double Dare tapings were shot with challenges involving a dunk tank filled with these rancid beans. It was as awful as it sounds, and one producer noted, at the end of the week, shooting day in, day out under hot lights, it was pretty ripe.
So ripe, in fact, that the mess couldn't simply be mopped up and thrown out. The production had to call in a septic removal truck to suction the remnants out of the studio.
Indeed, keeping the Double Dare stages clean was not only time-consuming, but an incredibly expensive and laborious process.
Though the show first taped in Philadelphia, production eventually moved to Orlando, Florida. There, even more extensive maintenance was required, like a specialized sewage system. Grates were installed in the studio floor, so the gallons of wasted food, amongst other sludge, could be drained after each taping.
On estimate, the production's cleanup crew used anywhere between 600 and 1,000 paper towels per show to wipe down the set. The task was unavoidable to mitigate safety hazards, but it nonetheless added to the extreme waste the show created.
Nothing seemed to end the production crew's lamentations that the studio, after a day of hot lights, smelled like death.
Eventually, the slippery, gooey glory of Double Dare wound to a close. In 1993, after its first run, a decision had been made not to renew the hit show.
Surprising, but also strategic. Nickelodeon was making way for its next big game show.
Legends of the Hidden Temple.
By the fall of 1993, Nick had proved its mettle in producing live-action shows. These programs were the network's earliest and most loaded calling card.
Hidden Temple was no exception. It brought in contestants between the ages of 12 to 14 who would compete in rounds of physical activities and trivia questions. They'd earn points by winning the challenges and eliminate competitors each round.
Those that went home first didn't leave empty-handed. In fact, the meager consolation prizes were mostly an opportunity to slot in sponsored product placements.
Runners-up received things like savings bonds from Hershey's chocolate, or sometimes Starkist canned tuna. These prizes improved slightly with each round, graduating to video games and hush puppy sneakers. Still, these were little more than the average preteen could buy with saved allowance money.
After rounds of competing, the last team standing finally reached the grand finale. They'd go on the Temple Run, a haunted house-type maze with a bevy of puzzles, obstacles, and ladders.
The show aired 120 temple runs, which contestants only won 32 times. Less than 1/4 of the kids took home a grand prize. And while these odds were certainly better than the 1% rate of winning blackjack in Vegas, it was clear that 25% was still pretty far from a fair shot. TV critics like the AV Club called the show practically unwinnable.
An honest assessment. Others speculated that the challenges were made so difficult as to ensure fewer winners, meaning that sponsors would have to dole out less prizes. If this was true, it was a grim reality for kids expecting a fair shot at winning.
Contestant Keely Garza looked back on her time on the show and considered its difficulty, saying, "I don't think the showrunners had really any idea that this game was practically impossible for a kid between the ages of 12 and 14 to complete."
Garza recalled that as a 12-year-old, by the time she made it to the Temple Run, she was exhausted, which didn't help the frightening haunted house aspect of the task ahead of her. Inside, scary temple guards, grown adults dressed in masks, were planted strategically. Garza remembered, "When the second guard got me and ushered me through that little door to the back of the set, I just burst into tears.